Atlantis for the Battle for Atlantis the weekend of Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And then they come home and host Ohio State the game before they go to Charlottesville. Ohio State's figures to be a top 20 team with Chris Holtmann doing a pretty good job at Columbus since he took over the program 2 years ago. They made the tournament this past year. That's a part of the ACC Big Ten Challenge. And then after Virginia in a week or so, they go to Gonzaga to take on the Bulldogs in a rematch from last year's game in the Smith Center. So that's the only thing about the thing with the Virginia game is just that part of the schedule from the end of November to the middle of December is as tough a part of the schedule as Carolina has all year. I think after Gonzaga, they play UCLA in Vegas too, so just throw that in there. New coach Mick Cronin out there trying to revive the UCLA program. So it's going to be a really interesting month for Carolina. And I wrote this in the article when I broke down the schedule. When we enter January, Carolina will already have played the toughest non-conference schedule arguably in college basketball among Power 5 teams.
I don't think there's any argument after what you just read there. Yeah. That's clearly the toughest.
And would have already have played Virginia. So if there's any reprieve with anything that came out of this is they open with 3 straight games at home.
They'll be battle tested, right?
Yeah. And I think that's something that, Roy Williams always – we're not scared to go play anybody.
That's true.
But I mean, this team could be 10-5 entering
you want to tell Roy, look, we're not scared to play anybody, but can we take a little line on the guys? Just a slight bit.
I'm pretty sure Hubert Davis made a claim to that last year on a radio show. He was like, I don't mind playing tough games, but I like winning too because we're not. Sometimes you don't win them all.
Yeah.
But so they start the new year off 3 straight games at home: Georgia Tech, Pitt, and the Clemson game.
Right.
So if there's any reprieve you get, is you start off with a pretty good home slate. Like I said, the most thing comes out of that is you get Clemson just trying to extend the streak. No team wants to be the team that ends the streak because it's inevitable. Eventually, Clemson will win there. You just don't want to be that team.
We've been saying this for a while now.
And then, you go from there. An interesting part was they play Pittsburgh twice in 3 games because after the Clemson game, they go to Pittsburgh. So you don't really see a whole lot of – that's like an NBA kind of thing where 2 and 3 games you might play the same team. So they'll go to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh figures to be improved. Jeff Capel's doing a pretty good job up there just recruiting, trying to get that program back to where Kevin Stallings had it in the late 2000s. That was a perennial top 10 program year in, year out when we were growing up. And then they go to Virginia Tech. So you get the 3 games at home, 2 difficult road tests to follow it up. Trying to think as we move on from there. Then they come back home and they play Miami. And that was a pretty fun game last year. Remember, Luke May had to hit the 3 just to get the game to overtime.
Fun? I say stressful.
Well, fun, stressful.
Adjective,
And then they go to State where Roy Williams hasn't lost since 2012. So if there's any month where Carolina's going to make some headway in the standings, January is a month where they might not – there's a good chance they could probably go undefeated in conference play.
Well, you look at November and December. I wanted to talk about this for a minute. There is a legitimate argument that you could make, maybe for the first time ever, that November and December overall might be a tougher I guess we can combine that as a month. Honestly, you could take the Battle for Atlantis out and you could still make the argument in just December alone that might be tougher than February. It is that tough this year. So, I think that January will be huge for the Tar Heels because you get into ACC play, you're going to get a little time to, okay, as you said, this team may be 10-5, something like that, going into conference play. This gives you a chance with a team that is going to have some young pieces still, very similar to last year, to get their legs back beneath them, get some wins on the schedule, and gain a little confidence. At least we think, we hope. Look, you never know who's going to decide to step up in the ACC. I talked about, I think Miami's not going to be all that great. Who the hell knows with Jim Larinaga? He always seems to find a way to put out a great product. They're always tough to play against. You never really know what State's going to be, especially early in their conference schedule. Usually they fall apart late, which will probably happen again this year because they just, that State for you, they suck.
All right.
There you go. Well, no, if we're being real honest, though, when you look at State, they've lost... They lost a pretty good amount from last year. They were supposed to have the I'm blanking on the kid's name now that went to the NBA instead of coming in and playing for them. So I mean, for them, I mean, like you just look at them and you're saying, okay, there's nothing that's telling us they're going to be better than they were a year ago. I mean, honestly, you know, when I look at that, one of the tougher games on the schedule was Pittsburgh, mainly just because, like you said, you know, last year was a very weird year for them because, yeah, they had a new coach, some energy in the program, but they had a lot of guys that left the program. They had at one time they only had like 9 or 10 scholarship guys playing. It was just really weird. And look, going to Pittsburgh, playing in the zoo is never easy. They're always, that fan base, especially if they can win a few games early on, maybe upset an out-of-conference opponent that's decent, all of a sudden, you know, that place gets a little bit of life into it. It won't be easy. But, yeah, I mean, January will be really good for the Tar Heels, but I'm intrigued, you know, looking at that December, February, you know, which of those two do you think is actually tougher? I mean, there's an argument to be made this year that December might be tougher than February.
Yeah, so speaking of February, we'll move on. And once we get into the month of February, Carolina hosts Boston College, and then they have a road game where they go to Florida State, and that's the game before they host Duke on Saturday.
Man,
so you start off with, you know, Boston College. Not, you know,
you would expect a win.
A win.
Yes.
You got to go to Tallahassee, where Carolina they won the last time they played there, but there's been times where we've gone there with really good teams and gotten shelled. This is a team last year that played in the ACC championship game in the ACC tournament and made the Sweet 16 in the NCAA tournament, and 2 years ago made the Elite Eight. Now they've lost some guys. But Leonard Hamilton's always going to have two things.
Leonard does that, you know.
They're going to have size,
7'3" or bigger guys, couple of them, and
they're usually the one team in the conference that matches Carolina depth wise, where they'll play 10 or 11 guys. They don't have the kind of talent that UNC has, but they play some dudes.
And they have always got that one guy that you don't talk about a whole lot, but the kid can shoot the lights out. It's always one of them. Now, I mean, look, they lost Cabangeli. They got a couple other guys that they're going to have to replace as well. But Florida State is one of those teams that they've kind of reached that point where, like, we're never going to say, okay, they're going to take a step back, right? They're always going to find somebody that can take over those roles. If they don't shoot the ball well like they did last year, then they're going to go inside to, you know, 2 guys that are over 7 foot. There's always something that is going to be tough to stop against them, and they're going to find a way to win games.
Yeah. So we'll come back from Tallahassee, and we host Duke. It'll be the first time for numerous of our guys that they get to experience the rivalry. I think it helps that it'll be in Chapel Hill first. It's not, you know, we don't have to go to Durham. Although last year it wasn't a problem for us.
The best part is we do not have to hear, hopefully. Please tell me there's not someone on their roster that's going to be the same level of hype as Zion was. No, I'm so glad we don't have to hear that again.
That won't happen. And, of course, this game's on February 8th. So also the thing about the first Duke game is they've moved it back up.
Pretty early.
Because the past couple years it's been into February.
Middle end.
So we were playing basically twice in 2 weeks. That was kind of one thing I had grown to like, was playing them that kind of close. But this is how traditionally was it was earlier,
right,
the week after the Super Bowl.
Well, the move is let's get people into college basketball right after the Super Bowl is over. Don't wait a couple of weeks, because to me, you know, I don't know from a regular casual college basketball fan's perspective, because, you know, we're locked in on Carolina the minute they take the floor. I mean, that game against Notre Dame, we'll be locked in from there. But for the casual college basketball fan, I feel like Duke Carolina is where you start to get locked in. So moving it up earlier makes sense.
So we host Duke, and you know that is what it is with the Blue Devils. Then we go to Winston-Salem for the first matchup with Wake Forest. You know, figures, you know, there's a chance for that game to be somewhat troublesome if Wake is playing for Danny Manning, who might be coaching for his job by that point.
You would think.
But this is a place where Carolina doesn't usually have any problems going on the road and winning. It's one of the few places in the ACC outside of NC State, because Roy owns them, that we go there and win on a semi-regular basis. Then we come back from Winston-Salem and we host Virginia. And so you go Duke, Wake, and then Virginia. I mean, that's pretty tough. We haven't won against Virginia at home since we won the national title in 2017 season. Remember, we watched that game together. It was one of those late night games that we played really good defensively, right. And I kind of really thought was what turned them back into a national title contender was how we played that night in the Smith Center. After the always troubling game with Virginia, we go to a place that isn't kind to us, and we go to South Bend to rematch with Notre Dame. Kind of weird that you start the season with Notre Dame, don't play them again until the end of the season in February. It's a place where Carolina's won in South Bend. Last time we won there, we won on a free throw late with either Joel Berry or Theo Pinson. But it's one of those stress games where, we don't play good. Notre Dame plays great, tough crowd, but always a pretty fun environment for Carolina.
Right.
Figures to be fun. And look, Notre Dame had a down year last year because they had so many injuries. So many injuries last year for him. Felt bad for him. Mike Bray's a hell of a coach, and he's done a really remarkable job in a program that, quite frankly, doesn't really – they don't care about basketball up there.
Yeah.
Then you end the month, and you go to Louisville. So you go to Louisville. We won there last year, but, this Louisville team figures to be better.
Yeah, different Louisville team this year.
I love – the one things I love about when the ACC expanded was you brought in Louisville and Syracuse. I love those kind of crowds with Carolina there because it's big time college basketball. And Chris Mack's done a phenomenal job. Come home from Louisville, you play host to NC State. We know that's a win. Just kidding. Oh. They won there 2 years ago. Then you go to Syracuse. So the back end of February really heats up with Duke, Virginia. You got to go to Louisville. You got State. You got Syracuse. I would just argue that, you were talking about December or February being tougher. I think I would lean February because you've got Duke and Virginia with road trips to Louisville and Syracuse.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, as the season progresses along, I think, you might feel a little different. It just depends on how some of those mid-level teams perform. Does Wake, like you say, play some inspired basketball for Danny Manning, who, let's be really honest, should be fired. He should not have lasted over the offseason. But maybe they come out and surprise some people. What is Notre Dame? Can they rebound after last year? Because, they had a lot of injuries last year. They also lost a lot of guys from that team last year. So we'll have to wait and see what they are. Does Louisville live up to the hype? I mean, I think they do because, Chris Mack, we're two guys that have really supported Chris Mack early in his career. We think he's going to be a great head coach there. And then, State and Syracuse, really the same thing. I mean, like I said, Syracuse, I feel like they're always going to be that team that's on the bubble, just about to get in. Once they get into the NCAA tournament, well, there you go. They're going to find a way to do something. What is NC State? Is NC State a team that's on the bubble? Or who knows? Maybe they jump out and really surprise some people and have a good season. So, I mean, February, like I said, it's always a tough month. But, I mean, with December, it's going to be really interesting. Those are 2 months that you're going to look back on if the Tar Heels do make a run in the NCAA tournament and say, okay, this is the reason why the Tar Heels are ready to go for the NCAA tournament. This is why they were able to put together that run, because they were battle-tested in these 2 months of the season.
So then you go to March, and Carolina only has 2 games in March, but they're 2 emotional games. You have senior night, which Carolina gets Wake Forest. It'll be the final game in the Smith Center for Brandon Robinson, Shea Russ, Caleb Ellis, Justin Pierce, and Christian Kelling. We've seen these games where Carolina doesn't play Duke on senior night, where Carolina struggles with just the emotions of the night. A couple years ago, was at Syracuse that Carolina almost lost to. It was Marcus Page and those guys senior night. So
this one will be a little different, though, because I feel like by this point, Wake Forest will kind of know what's happening with Danny Manning. I feel like Carolina should come in and win that game pretty easy. I'm going to be real.
So you get past senior night, and you go to another senior night. Well, at Duke, they call it freshman night because we'll play the Blue Devils to win the regular season.
They got that one senior that's never stepped on the floor. He's been I'm pretty sure he's one of the extra towel boys that they use, during games. That's about all he does. So, yeah, he'll be out there. People in the stands will be like, who the hell is this? We don't even know who this guy is. Oh, yeah, that's great. That's great.
And so Carolina ends the season in Cameron Indoor Stadium. Before, of course, you getting into tournament play with the ACC and the NCAA tournaments the following 2 weeks, respectively. So that's Carolina's schedule. At some point later in the preseason, we'll go through the schedule and give some predictions.